May God bless your day and the entire week ahead of you, wherever you happen to be listening from right now. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're taking you on a journey back to one of the oldest, most universally recognized narratives in human history.
Right, but we're looking at it through a very specific lens today.
Exactly. We are jumping right into Genesis, specifically chapter 8. This is that moment where the great flood ends, the waters recede, and Noah finally steps out of the ark.
And it is just a moment of profound transition. To truly understand what's happening beneath the surface of the text here, we are pulling from some incredibly detailed source material today.
We really are.
We've got the study notes from two highly regarded texts. So that's the Holman Study Bible and the NAA, or Nova Almeida Actualizada Study Bible. And these notes, they provide a wealth of linguistic, historical, and theological context that, well, it completely reshapes how you read the narrative.
It totally reshapes it. The mission for this deep dive is to go way beyond that childhood Sunday school version of Noah's Ark that you probably have in your head.
Yeah, the one with the smiling animals.
Right, exactly. The images of the smiling giraffes and elephants poking their heads out of a cute little wooden boat, maybe a rainbow shining overhead. We are going to unpack the actual chronological math of this event, the deep linguistic meanings hidden in the original Hebrew, and the staggering theological insights that the study Bibles reveal about human nature and grace.
It's a lot heavier than the children's books make it out to be.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this. Chapter 8 kicks off with a phrase that sounds incredibly simple, but actually carries massive weight. The chapter opens with the words, God remembered Noah.
Which is fascinating, because how our modern understanding of the word remember works actually does a massive disservice to the text here.
How so?
Well, when we use that word today, it almost always implies that we previously forgot something, right? We say things like, oh, I just remembered I need to buy milk, or I remembered your birthday at the last minute.
Right. It frames memory as this kind of passive recovery of lost information. And reading it that way makes it sound like the creator of the universe just suddenly slapped his forehead and said, oh no, the guy in the boat. I left him floating out there for months.
Yeah, obviously the text isn't implying that God had a moment of forgetfulness. The Holman notes are very explicit on this point. In biblical Hebrew, when the text says, God remembers, it is marking a definitive turning point in the narrative.
It's an action word.
Yes, it suggests the initiation of an active, miraculous intervention. It's the fulfillment of a covenant promise. And the study notes actually point out several other instances of this exact Hebrew usage just to show a clear pattern.
Like with Lot, right.
Exactly. The text says, God remembered Lot before destroying the city of Sodom, pulling him to safety. It says he remembered Rachel to open her womb after years of infertility. And later on in the narrative, he remembered the Israelites when they were suffering as slaves in Egypt.
Oh.
So in every single one of these cases, remembering translates much closer to, I am stepping in right now to deliver.
That completely changes the tone of that opening sentence. It is not an apology for a lapse in memory. It is a profound declaration of rescue.
Absolutely.
And the very next thing the text tells us is that God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters began to subside. But again, looking at our sources, there is a brilliant double meaning hidden in the original language regarding this specific word, wind.
Oh, it is just a beautiful piece of linguistic poetry. It really frames the rest of the chapter. The Hebrew word used there is ruach.
Ruach.
Right. Now, ruach can be translated literally as wind, which makes perfect meteorological sense. You have a massive global flood, and a strong, persistent wind would logically help in drying up the water. But ruach is also the exact same Hebrew word used for spirit.
So on a literal level, it's a physical wind drying the earth, but on a theological level, it is the Spirit of God moving over the surface of the earth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a deliberate, highly intentional echo of the very first chapter of Genesis. Think back to Genesis 1.2, where the Spirit of God, the Ruach, was hovering over the face of the deep, chaotic, unformed waters before creation was ordered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The authors of these study notes emphasize that the receding of the floodwaters is being framed textually as a literal new creation.
Like a cosmic reboot.
A cosmic reboot. The terrifying chaos of the flood is finally ending, and the Ruach is once again actively preparing the earth to sustain life, just like it did in the very beginning.
A cosmic reboot. That phrasing really captures the scale of what is happening. But let's talk about the timeline of this reboot, because this is where my mind was completely blown by the NAA Study Bible notes.
The math is incredible.
It really is. I think the popular cultural conception of the flood is that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, the water went down, and then everyone just hopped off the boat.
That's what most people think, yeah.
But 40 days is just how long the rain lasted. The actual time Noah, his family, and the animals spent locked inside this ark is staggering.
The NAA notes provide this phenomenal, highly detailed chronological breakdown of their time in the ark. They mathematically calculate the timeline using ancient calendar systems. And these were based on 30-day lunar months.
Okay.
When you tally up all the specific chronological markers given in the text, they weren't in there for just 40 days or even a few months. They were locked inside that ark for a total of 370 days.
That is just wild. Think about being stuck inside essentially a giant wooden barge. Zero steering, no engine, and no windows to look out of. I mean, most of us went stir-crazy being locked in our comfortable houses with Wi-Fi for a few weeks a couple of years ago.
Yeah, imagine doing it for over a year.
Over a year, in the dark, surrounded by the devastating sounds of a worldwide catastrophe outside, while packed in with a literal zoo. The sheer logistics of that are hard to even wrap your head around, and the source actually gives us the specific dates based on Noah's lifespan to back up that 370-day count.
It's incredibly precise. It reads almost like a ship's logbook. According to the text, the whole ordeal begins when Noah and his family enter the ark on the 17th day of the second month of Noah's 600th year.
The study notes even take it a step further and calculate the days of the week based on that ancient calendar. They note that this 17th day of the second month, the day the doors were shut, was a Sunday.
Right. Then the text outlines 150 days of the waters prevailing over the earth. Following that period, the ark finally physically rests on the mountains on the 17th day of the 7th month.
Which the calendar math tells us was a Friday.
A Friday. So they hit solid ground on a Friday, but their journey was far from over. The waters still had to recede enough for the earth to be habitable. It wasn't until the 27th day of the second month of Noah's 601st year.
Wednesday.
A Wednesday, exactly, that the earth was declared dry enough for them to actually exit. That entire span adds up to exactly 370 days.
So they hit solid ground, but they're still trapped inside for months just waiting for the water levels to drop. How do they even know what is happening outside? This brings us to the famous story of the birds, which the notes frame essentially as Noah's ancient method of gathering environmental data.
Data collection, exactly.
The text says, Noah opened the window of the ark. And the Holman notes mention the specific Hebrew word, halon, for window, emphasizing that it was likely a structural opening designed specifically to check the external conditions, not just a skylight to let sun in.
Right, he's running tests.
So first he sends out a raven. A raven goes out into this post-apocalyptic landscape. Why start with a raven?
This is where ancient biology intersects perfectly with the theology of the text. The Holman notes explain the nature of the bird. A raven is a scavenger. It eats carrion, which is dead flesh.
Okay, gruesome but practical.
Very practical. When Noah sent the raven out into the world, the text says it just kept flying back and forth. The implication here is that the raven was able to survive outside perfectly fine because it could land on all the floating debris and feed on the massive amounts of carrion left behind by the devastating flood.
It didn't need a nice dry branch.
No, it didn't require a clean, dry, or living place to rest. Therefore, its failure to return to the ark with anything didn't give Noah the necessary data about the actual state of the earth.
The raven was perfectly content in the chaos and destruction. It found a way to thrive in the mess. So Noah realizes this method isn't giving him the answers he needs, and he switches his strategy. He sends out a dove, and he ends up sending this dove out 3 different times.
Right, because the nature of the dove is entirely different from the raven. A dove requires dry land, and it needs living plants to feed on seeds and insects.
Makes sense.
So the first time Noah sends it out, the dove comes right back to the ark. There is simply no clean place for it to land. The second time is the crucial turning point moment. The dove returns to Noah, and in its beak is a freshly plucked olive leaf.
So a dove brings back an olive leaf. I mean, it's a nice poetic image, but why an olive leaf specifically? Did it just grab the first green thing it saw floating by? Or is there a geographical reason that this specific plant matters so much to Noah?
The Holman study notes point out a vital botanical and geographical fact here. Olive trees generally grow at lower elevations. They thrive in valleys and lower mountain slopes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It is. So when the dove brings back a freshly plucked olive leaf, It is definitive, empirical proof for Noah. It proves that the waters haven't just exposed the absolute highest barren mountain peaks. The water level has actually receded significantly down into the valleys where vegetation is starting to grow again.
That is such an amazing detail. It transforms the event from just a nice story about a bird into ancient, calculated environmental testing. And of course, the study Bibles note that this specific moment, the dove returning to the ark with the olive leaf, is exactly where humanity gets its universal, worldwide symbol for peace.
It is a profound symbol that has permeated almost every culture on Earth. It represents the ultimate relief that the devastation is over, that the wrath has subsided, and that life can begin again.
Beautiful.
It is also worth noting where all this testing is taking place geographically. The text states that the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. The notes clarify that this isn't necessarily a single specific peak, but rather a larger, rugged mountain range located in the region of modern-day Turkey and Armenia.
It's amazing that this single olive leaf became such a worldwide symbol from that region. But the physical evidence of a massive flood isn't the only thing that permeated other cultures, right? I noticed the Holman notes included a fascinating visual insert right in the middle of this section about the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, yes. The inclusion of that insert provides essential historical context for the modern reader. For those unfamiliar, the Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Babylonian text, and Tablet 11 of that epic contains its own massive, detailed flood narrative.
Very similar to Noah's.
Very similar. The study notes include this reproduction to demonstrate how this collective memory of a catastrophic, world-altering flood was deeply embedded in the culture, literature, and history of the entire ancient Near East. It wasn't an isolated concept.
It shows that the biblical narrative exists in a world where the cultural memory of a great deluge was a shared foundational reality for multiple civilizations. It grounds the text in ancient history.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at the actual exit. The earth is finally dry. It is Wednesday, the 27th day of the second month, Noah's 601st year. The door is opened, and they can finally leave. But there is a detail highlighted in the Holman notes about their time in the ark that is honestly terrifying when you stop and think about it.
The silence.
The silence. For that entire 370-day catastrophic year, there is absolutely no record of God speaking directly to Noah.
This raises an incredibly important question about the nature of faith and endurance. Think about the psychological toll that silence would take on a person. God gave Noah the initial instructions to build the ark, to gather the animals, and to get inside before the rain started.
And then nothing.
Complete silence. For over a year. While the world outside was violently destroyed and they were trapped in the dark interior of this boat, God didn't provide any daily updates. He didn't check in periodically to say, hold on, you're doing great, just a few more months to go.
The sheer mental fortitude and faith required to sit in that darkness, smelling the overpowering scent of the animals, hearing the relentless rain pounding on the roof, feeling the boat pitching in the waves, and just waiting on a silent God. It is profound.
It truly is.
So when God finally does break that silence in chapter 8, telling them to leave the ark, he deliberately echoes that Genesis 1 creation mandate all over again. He says, be fruitful and multiply on the earth.
The new creation has officially begun, and humanity is being given a fresh start. And Noah's immediate response to stepping out onto this renewed earth is incredibly telling.
You'd think the first thing a guy would do after being cooped up on a dark, smelly boat with thousands of animals for a year is immediately start building a house or plant a vineyard or just run around in a wide-open field to stretch his legs.
Right, get some fresh air.
But his very first act upon leaving the ark is to build an altar to the Lord.
He builds an altar, and the text says he offers a holocaust. Now, for a modern listener, that word carries a heavy, deeply tragic historical weight associated with the atrocities of World War II. But in this ancient biblical context, the term translates simply to a completely burnt offering.
Okay.
It is a sacrifice where the entire animal is consumed by fire upon the altar. Nothing is kept back or eaten by the worshippers. But he doesn't just offer any random animal that wandered off the boat. The text specifies he took of every clean animal and clean bird.
Which is interesting, because what exactly defines an animal as clean in this early stage of history? Because Moses and the complex Levitical laws of the Torah haven't happened yet in the biblical timeline.
That's a great point. The Holman notes define this based on the later Torah categories that the original Israelite readers of Genesis would have inherently understood. A clean mammal is specifically defined as one that ruminates, meaning it chews the cud and has a completely split or cloven hoof.
Think of animals like sheep, goats, or cattle.
Exactly. And the clean birds were the non-carrion eaters, so no birds of prey or scavengers like the raven we discussed earlier. But the most important point the study Bibles make recording this moment is the staggering economic and survival cost of this specific sacrifice.
Because earlier in Genesis, God instructed Noah to take 7 pairs of every clean animal onto the ark, compared to just 1 pair of the unclean animals.
Precisely. The world has just been wiped out. You have incredibly limited breeding stock to repopulate the earth and provide future food and clothing for your family. Taking these immensely valuable clean animals and burning them entirely to ash on an altar is a massive, costly statement.
It's giving up your future security.
It is. It's the ultimate expression of profound gratitude for their deliverance from the flood. And, as the NAA notes point out, it is also an act of expiation.
Meaning
Meaning it is a sacrifice intended to cover over debt, seeking atonement and restoring a right relationship with God.
the text then uses a very specific phrase. It says that God smelled the soothing aroma of this sacrifice. The NAA notes dive deep into this wording, explaining that this is anthropomorphic language, which simply means the text is using human physical traits, like the sense of smell, to describe God's unseen actions and acceptance. But the original Hebrew term for that pleasant or soothing aroma is nihok.
This is a brilliant linguistic connection that completely elevates the scene. The Hebrew word nihok means rest, quietness, or tranquility, and it is a direct, deliberate play on Noah's own name, which literally translates to rest.
Wow, I had no idea.
It is incredible because we usually think of sacrifice as something inherently violent and bloody. But the linguistics here tell a completely different story. Noah, whose very name means rest, is using this costly sacrifice to literally create an atmosphere of tranquility. The sacrifice offered by the man of rest creates a nihok, a soothing, restful aroma that effectively hits the pause button on cosmic destruction and calms the divine wrath.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a bit paradoxical. God accepts this restful sacrifice, and then he makes a silent promise in his heart. He vows that he will never again curse the ground or destroy all living creatures with a flood because of humanity. But look at the actual reason he gives for this promise. God says he won't destroy them again because the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth.
It catches you off guard, doesn't it?
It really does. Hang on, something that's tricking me up here. In Genesis chapter 6, didn't God send the flood because humanity's heart was evil? Why would he now promise to never do it again for the exact same reason? Am I reading that right?
You are reading it exactly right, and it is perhaps the most profound theological shift in the entire Genesis narrative. The study notes from both the Holman and NAA Bibles unpack this paradox beautifully. The text is explicitly stating a difficult truth.
Which is?
The massive, catastrophic flood did not cure human nature. The waters of judgment did not miraculously wash away humanity's deeply ingrained propensity for sin. People are just as flawed, just as selfish, and just as prone to evil coming out of the ark as they were going into it. The human condition remains entirely unchanged.
So if humanity hasn't changed, what did change to prompt this promise?
God's response to humanity is what changes. The notes explain that this is the pivotal moment where grace and love are firmly established as the prevailing forces over total destruction.
A shift in the divine approach.
Yes. God is essentially acknowledging, if I deal with humanity purely on the basis of strict, unyielding justice, I will have to destroy the world every single generation, because their hearts are deeply flawed from the time they're young. Therefore, I must choose a different path. I must choose to endure them. I must choose grace.
It is heavy.
The flood demonstrated the terrifying severity of divine justice, but the aftermath of the flood establishes the long-suffering endurance of divine mercy.
I must choose grace.
Yeah.
That is incredibly powerful. God recognizes our flaws and decides to love us through them anyway. And he seals this internal promise of mercy with an external physical gift to the world. The final verse of chapter 8 is God promising that while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
The Holman notes describe this final verse as God deliberately replacing the terrifying, unpredictable chaos of the flood with the predictable, comforting rhythms of life. The flood was a massive interruption of the natural order. It was a terrifying reversal of creation back into watery chaos.
Right, the whole reboot concept.
Exactly. So the promise of the seasons is the eternal guarantee of earthly stability. It is God ensuring that the world will be a safe, consistent place for humanity to live, to plant, and to harvest, even in our deeply flawed post-flood state.
So what does this all mean for you listening today? This ancient text, Genesis 8, is so much more than a simple survival story about a man and some animals on a boat. It is a meticulously recorded mathematical chronology of an ancient cataclysm.
With specific days of the week, no less.
Exactly. It highlights the immense faith required to sit in silence and wait for deliverance. It is a raw, honest look at the enduring flaws of human nature. And ultimately, it is a profound testament to the establishment of divine grace and the earthly order we still rely on every single day.
The transition from the chaos of total judgment to the steady rhythm of grace is the very foundation of the world we currently inhabit.
It really is.
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to explore on your own as you go about your week. We just talked about how God promised the seasons, summer and winter, seed time and harvest, as a direct divine response to human imperfection.
Right.
How does knowing that the rhythmic cycle of the seasons, going from the heat of summer to the chill of fall and from the dead of winter to the bloom of spring, was originally framed in these ancient texts as a deliberate concession to our own flaws? How does that change the way you experience the changing of the seasons today? Every time the leaves turned golden or the first snow melted into spring mud, it was viewed by these ancient writers as a cosmic, physical reminder that grace is actively holding the world together. Think about that the next time you feel the first sharp chill of winter or the first warm breeze of spring. God bless all listeners.